Jason in Washington, D.C. Hey, Jason, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to comment that I think both people are wrong in the situation. The statements that should have come out was that we wasted $1 billion liberating Libya. That's a complete, counter to what we're doing, because in the long run, actually, Libya was, let's call it, saved for whatever reason, basically because of banking interests. Everybody seems to forget that Libya had $65 billion in sovereign wealth funds that under Gaddafi, after he became a good guy, Tony Blair, under the guise of J.P. Morgan, went over there and tried to scoop up some of the money to manage for Western banks. And when Gaddafi lost all of this money, suddenly he decides, hey, I don't want to participate in this petrodollar trade. Mm-hmm. And this is what spurred this whole thing, all this thing about democracy and all this other stuff in Libya. No, it was all about the banks, because the rebels, about 3 or 4 weeks into the event, took a time out from their fighting to form a bank so that they can do oil transactions.
Right.
So there's a lot of this stuff here going on that everybody gets. It's kind of like the terrorists. They're after us for our freedom, but everybody seems to forget it was because we had U.S. troops stationed in Saudi Arabia, the Holy Land.
Right.
So I blame both parties for this because they're not saying the right thing, which has to do with we're putting our nose in places we shouldn't. We should have taken $1 billion and maybe built 1,000 liquid natural gas stations around the country so that all the 18-wheelers can run off our own domestic natural gas and help free us up from foreign oil.
Yeah. What you're talking about, who's that crazy billionaire? T. Boone Pickens. Yeah, that was the Pickens plan, was convert all the 18-wheelers to natural gas, convert all the cars to electricity, or at least 80% of the fleet. And because 80% of people don't drive more than 50 miles a day, and you can easily go 50 miles in an electric car these days. I mean, you can go 100 miles easily in an electric car.
Yeah, and what it's essentially, I go back to Wesley Clark's interview where he talked about, around 9/11, him seeing the plans, and he said something that we saw all of these things. We're going to do Libya, then we're going to go to Egypt, then we're going to go to Syria, then we're going to do Iraq. And I'm like sitting here, and I'm like, I'm under the impression that both political parties, no matter who you put in, you think things are changing, but they're not. See, because the big tip-off to me was the fact that Obama was supposed to clean up Wall Street, and the 5 largest banks have created $230 trillion worth of derivatives, which have increased 39% under Obama, where the taxpayer's on the hook. Yeah. So all of the stuff we're talking about here,
well, if you look at the legislation that got passed, that does regulate the banks, the problem is that it needs implementing legislation. Dodd-Frank requires a second. Dodd-Frank created all these frameworks, and one of them was to actually regulate derivatives, and then Congress has to vote to fund the agency that's going to do the work. And the Republicans in Congress have absolutely blocked any efforts to do that. So, I'm not...
we had the House and the Senate.
We had the House and the Senate for 2.5 months.
And they couldn't have... that's like...
And they couldn't do everything. No, they couldn't. And the reason that they couldn't do anything was because you still had Senate rules that said that Dr. No, that the various senators could put individual bills on hold and simply say, no, we're not going to consider these. And that happened.
I'm very thankful. You're talking about this thing with the NDAA, but let's not forget Carl Levin let it slip out that the administration specifically requested that Americans be included in this bill. Yeah. So the president signed a law that stripped Americans of their civil
No, I don't, Jason. I don't disagree with you at all on the NDAA, and I'm really glad that Chris Hedges won that thing. But if the bottom line, if the end point of what you're saying is that we should have some kind of purity test, right? That we should be looking at the president and saying, he doesn't do everything right. He's not progressive enough for us. Then I want you to think back to 1980. I remember 1980. Jimmy Carter had gone moderate, right? Jimmy Carter deregulated the trucking industry in 1978. He deregulated the air travel industry in 1979. Louise and I started a travel agency in 1983 as a result of that deregulation and built it from nothing up to a $6 million business in 3 years. I mean, there was a lot of opportunity as a consequence of that deregulation, but what happened ultimately was, that travel agency that we built just recently got sold to a giant multi-billion-dollar corporation. We sold it after 5 years. But the point is that Carter was in the process of making us energy independent. Reagan came in and did away with that. Carter was in the process of putting together a deal between the Palestinians and the Israelis. He would have made it happen. He damn near got there. Reagan put an end to that. Carter was in the process of supporting union workers. Reagan's first action was to bust up Patco. He put an end to that. Carter was strengthening our laws that protected the commons and that protected the safety of people. Reagan put an end to that. So, progressives, Ted Kennedy primarying Jimmy Carter, and progressives sitting around saying, Jimmy Carter, he's not good enough for me. That gave us Ronald Reagan, which gave us 32 years of the destruction of America.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
So do you really want to sit around and tell me that, President Obama isn't perfect enough for me? He hasn't passed the purity test, so I'm not going to vote for him. No, don't even try.